Just a quick disclaimer before we begin. I know that many of you will never want to restart your island, and that's totally understandable. I'm not here to try and convince you to. This video is just directed towards people who are on the fence about doing so and want to see the pros and cons, as well as the alternative of flattening. Now let's jump right into the video. Restarting your island could be possibly one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make in Animal Crossing New Horizons. But with the game being over 3 years old and no more updates coming, as well as a ton of new interesting challenges arriving from the community, it's fair to say that a lot of people have been considering this, and many have even done so. While some of us are lucky enough to have a second Switch so we can create a new island without restarting our main one, that sadly doesn't apply to everyone, so the hard decision has to be made. And with this decision can come a range of emotions. You might feel really happy that you decided to restart, it'll give you a fresh perspective on the game. Or you could potentially feel regret. You might feel like the tasks ahead of you are too overwhelming and just stop playing completely. It's happened to plenty of people. So with this question being so prevalent in 2023, I'm trying to help you decide, should you restart or flatten your island instead? Now, if you do decide to restart your island, I think the main thing you should consider is how badly will you miss everything that you're going to be losing permanently. When you start up a new island, you can get all of this back, of course, in terms of items, villagers, and quests and such, but in terms of your actual island, you're never going to find one exactly like it. There are definitely some ways to lessen the blow. For example, if you have lots of amiibo cards, then you can easily just bring back some of your dreamies, which is nice to do, or perhaps even use a site like Nookazon to find them again. In terms of all the items you've collected, you could send them over to a friend's island. You'll need someone to help you do this that you trust, of course, and it will take quite a lot of time to get each and every item over there, but it could be a good way to help you start over again. Or to make things more simple, you could perhaps just use a treasure island if you're able to get access to one of those to give yourself a head start with a new island. These things definitely lessen the blow, but you will have to consider that you're going to have to take a lot of time to build your island back up again. And for many people, like I said earlier on in the video, this task can be a bit too overwhelming and they give up. I've had this happen a lot of times when I started new islands, but thankfully I'm lucky enough that it's just on my second Switch. I've never lost my main island, Kokomo. However, if you're just so bored with your current island and you don't see yourself playing on it at all, but you really want to start over in the game, I definitely think it could be a good idea. After all, yeah, it's nice to keep your island around, but if you're never going to play on it again realistically, then why not just restart it? In this sort of situation, regardless of what decision you make, the island is not going to be enjoyed, so you might as well just start over, in my opinion. But if you do have a lot of attachment to your island and you really don't want to lose it for whatever reasons you might have, then flattening it could definitely be a good decision and a nice alternative to starting over. Now, there are some downsides to flattening. It does take a lot of time. It can be a very tedious task to flatten your island. I mean, look at my island, for example, that we're currently walking through. Imagine me having to remove all of this stuff to make it completely flat. It would take a lot of time. Also, if you do decide to flatten, you have to remember you won't be getting a completely fresh start. Whilst it is good in the decorating side of things, so you can really start from scratch in terms of that, you won't be able to start fresh with your Nook Mile goals, you won't be able to enjoy getting your first new island again. Really, the main thing you'll be able to do is just build your island up from scratch again in terms of decorating. Although if you did want to make things a little bit more tricky for yourself, you could also remove yourself of bells and such too. But there's no denying that either way, it's not going to give you a complete fresh start experience like starting over with a new island. I still definitely think though flattening can be a really great idea, and it's probably what a lot of people are looking for and they just don't realize it. After all, like I said, when some people restart the game, they get so overwhelmed by all they'll have to do to build their island up again. Whereas if you just flatten, yeah, you will have a lot of work ahead of you, it's not nearly as much as starting completely from scratch. However, flattening isn't as useful to those of you who want to restart your island so you can begin a new challenge. A lot of challenges that I've seen online definitely would require you to start over with a new island. After all, there's only so much you can do when creating these challenges with existing islands. I definitely think having these challenges makes restarting your island a lot more exciting, and it gives you focused goals, which I think makes it a lot harder to give up on. But of course, challenges don't last forever, so I think it'd be worth considering if once the challenge has basically ended, you would regret having restarted. Like I said earlier, really the only way of getting another island without deleting your main island is to get a second Switch, and this is not an option that most people have. After all, Nintendo Switches are really expensive, But if you are able to get your hands on one and you definitely think you would make good use out of it, then it could be an option. I decided to do this, and you can see that I'm playing around on my new island on screen right now, but the thing is, I'm a content creator, so I get a lot of use out of having the second Switch. If you're buying a whole new Switch just to play a new copy of Animal Crossing New Horizons, then that's definitely a pretty expensive investment. Perhaps if someone in your family has a Switch you could borrow to start over a new island, provided they don't have an island already themselves that you'd be deleting, which you shouldn't do, to be honest, that would be a little bit evil. That could be an option too. I think that would be a nice way of doing it without having to delete your main island, and you could basically just kind of rent their Switch from them for a little bit. When I bought my second Switch, I got it from a second-hand store, which did bring down the price a fair bit, but it was still pretty darn expensive just to play another copy of Animal Crossing New Horizons so I could create some new islands. Ultimately, the answer to this question I think depends on what type of player you are. Are you someone who wants to start over completely from scratch, maybe to begin a new challenge or just experience the game from fresh again after a lot of time? Or are you someone who doesn't want to commit to a full fresh start, but you still are tired of your current island? Then maybe Flattening could be a good option for you. I think for someone like me, I will probably honestly never restart my main island. And this would be true even if I didn't have a second Switch. I'm honestly too attached to it, and I feel like if I restarted it, I would regret it. I also tend to start new islands quite a lot and then get bored halfway through because I've already played this game to death, and I think that's true for a lot of you as well. I have also flattened at one point in history, but I found that quite a tedious experience, so it's really hard to say which would be better for someone like me. At the end of the day though, it's your game, so you have to make the decision that is best for you. If you are going to start over though, and you don't want to make things too hard on yourself, then I'd maybe consider using some of those tips earlier, like getting a friend to store some of your items for you, perhaps maybe getting some amiibo cards for your favorite villagers so you don't lose them, or going on something like Nookazon or using a treasure island so you can make some of that progress back. Or if you want to flatten your island, then maybe come up with a plan for what you're going to do with it when you're flattened, so you don't go through all of that effort and then just give up on it, because that would honestly be a lot of wasted time and no one likes that. I'd love to know in the comments section down below though, have you ever restarted your island, or have you ever flattened, and which decision did you prefer? I'd really appreciate it if people in the comments section could leave some of their experiences too, so everyone can get some really good advice about what decision they should be making. If you made it to the end, be sure to comment Bob's Gang down below so I know you did. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing and turning on notifications for more.